Hi, this is Regina White Favors with a Favors Mentoring School topic. So, the topic is we cannot learn lessons for people. One of the hardest things to do is understand the importance of when you need to know your limit um, in someone's life, especially if you are making a contribution to someone's life. So, for example, we like to make this statement a lot of times, know when someone is there for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? And so the lesson that a person has to learn for himself or herself is based upon that same three category dynamic: reason, season, or lifetime. You have problems that are 1 minute, you have problems that are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 year, then you have 15-year problems, 20-year problems, 25-year problems. The situation that's going on now with Ukraine, that's going to take double digit years for those individuals to be able to recover. Not only the country itself, the administration, but the citizens. The citizens, you had many people who were in school, medical school, research, who had jobs, who had just bought property, who were moving from one economic class to the next, who were improving in their finances, and all of that was interrupted. I don't know if it's completely halted or stopped, but it's halted or stopped at this moment. And so it's going to take some time for them to come out of that. Uh, not Once they get to a place of non-war. Right now, it is still war field. It is still being attacked. Ukraine is still being attacked from Putin and Russia. And so you have citizens on both sides of the battlefield in a state of war, in a state of, I don't know, terror, in a state of inconvenience. And inconvenience is such a very small word to apply to that particular issue. But once they get out of a state of non war, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are in a state of peace. That only means that they are in a state of pursuing stability, pursuing sustainability, and pursuing predictability, right? That you want things to go back to a more predictable nature. So, for instance, another instance would be if you live in a territory in the United States that always gets tornadoes, you have a predictable understanding of your state and your area always receiving tornadoes, right? That is something that is part of the fabric of that city, town, state, or whatever. And so you understand that to be part of your job in a sense of carrying on yourself to live in that place. Otherwise, if it bothered you so much, then you would just move. But sometimes somebody else's predictability is not your predictability. So even though the tornado hits every season, it may it never hit your house. It never hit your area. So then now you adopt this predictable statement or this predictability how you guide your behavior. Well, it never comes over here, so I don't really need to board up my house. Usually it hits everybody else's town, everybody else's house, everybody else's side of the tracks, and so they end up having to lose their homes. But I've never really had to have to endure a tornado. I mean, we already have plans for what we need to do. And so then that becomes your predictability. Their unpredictability becomes your predictability. But one day that tornado might actually hit your house. It might actually hit your house. Then your life becomes unpredictable, and it becomes somebody else's predictability for them. So then that is something that is a seasonal situation, right? It is there's a reason to it in terms of the tornado hitting your area, but then there's a seasonal aspect of it where it's maybe 50-50 chance that it might hit your area. And then the lifetime aspect of it is that long-term recovery that's going to be required. And so you can give up during that lifetime, you can stay the course during that lifetime, but it is your lifetime for which you have to learn whatever lessons you need to learn. One of the most important lessons thus is The financial lesson. This is always the lesson that everyone misses. We can maintain a network of friendships and family members, and so if something hits our house, we can go and live with them. We can maintain a sense of coordination with our jobs to make sure we don't do anything to keep us from losing the job or anything like that, right? We do that, but we have not mastered the financial task of ensuring that we have 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund if something should happen, especially in the tornado situation where you may have insurance, right? You, you may have insurance, homeowners insurance, flood insurance that could actually work on your behalf, but I don't know how often they cut those checks and how long it takes for them to cut that check. And then for how long it would take for you to get situated so you can put in the forms and the filings and things like that. Meaning that you don't have access to money at your fingertips, right? Even if you had money in the bank, do you have a safety deposit box within your house, some sort of little safe thing, so that if that it had maybe like $1,000 to $2,000 in it, and so that if something happens, you can still get up and go to the next town and get a motel. And that's what I think we don't think about. And we cannot learn the lesson for somebody. So even if you took somebody in and they had a house fire, they had a flood uh, situation, they lost their job. They might have been a person part of a war, current war situation. Even with that, there is so much empathy and sympathy for the person and their situation and the context and the reasonings, right, uh, that come with that. But you still cannot learn their lesson. You still can't learn their lesson. They still have to learn their lesson. You still can't treat them like a child. You can take them in and board them and shelter them and feed them, but you still have to talk to the grown adult in that person. And that's where it gets very tricky because the person is experiencing an emotional turmoil as a result of some incident in their life, traumatic incident in their life, where they don't feel like they have the time to think on a logical basis because now they have come to live with you. And so then they are expecting you to do all of the logical thinking when it comes to them, but they are still 100% responsible adults. We're not talking about kids whose parents died or kids whose parents were abusive to them, or you're taking in an orphan, you're taking in a foster kid, you're taking in someone who is underage, who cannot go and work for himself until maybe high school age, and who actually need caregiving and and some emotional guidance and wisdom, and they actually need all of what you have to offer because you're in the caregiver role. We're not talking about that person. We're talking about a grown adult. Even if the flood was not their fault, and even if they lost their job and it was due to massive layoffs, which are not their fault, you still have to um, discuss and converse with them as adults. So that means you have to stay. It's strangely enough, it's hard, but it's strangely enough you have to stay on them. Okay, did you go and file the paperwork for the flood? Okay, I'm gonna do it. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna do it. No, did you go and file the paperwork? Because the one thing that we it's hard for us to say in those moments with the person is this one statement: this house is not your house. I understand that you lost your house, but my house is not your house. So that means you need to get on your um, your task to try to make sure that you can get back into your house, and then you can control things the way that you want to do or control them in your house. That's a very hard statement to say to somebody because people literally want to wallow in the pain and the emotions that are driving them in that moment because of loss. And yes, do people need a certain amount of uh, time to sort of address those issues and everything? Yes. But you also have to picture yourself not having access to any resources to anybody at all. What would you do? You would go to a shelter. You would do what you need to do. They will give you a list of items to complete. You will complete those items unless you want to be kicked out of the shelter. When I was when I had to go to a shelter, I think Salvation Army was the one that gave me a list of things that I had to do, X amount of things I had to do to be considered for going on program. Program for a single person without a kid would have been like 6 months, I think. And then there were other types of programs that were connected to people who had kids, and there were programs that were connected to people with a substance use abuse issue. And then they also, Salvation Army also took in people who were recently paroled, I think, and they were paroled to that shelter. And so they had that programming. So they had different types of programming, different types of lessons, different types of timelines for each individual based upon the type of individual, the time that the person needed, and the resources that they had. Okay, well, you have to think on the same terms when you are helping people. There are different, again, there are different types of problems. You have, and with different types of time frames, and then you have to move it to this idea. So, is this person in my life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime? What is it? What kind of problem am I going to solve for this person? And you're not calling the person a problem, right? That's not what you're doing, but it is a problem for you. And they are asking you to solve that problem, which means they are asking you to be a solution for them. So then you have to figure out what your boundaries are going to be, what your timeline is going to be. If you're taking in somebody like a shelter, is it going to be for 6 months? Is it just an emergency type situation and they already have something already worked out? Is it for a year? Is this person with a kid? Is this person being recently paroled? Whatever it is, you have to be just as structured and organized. But your limit, your lesson for you is that you are not a shelter. That's your lesson too, that you are not a shelter. Unless you want to become a shelter and structure and organize yourself in the same very way, you have to set limits and boundaries for you, for who you are as an individual and what you're trying to accomplish. Because your lesson is to make sure that you tap into your gifts and talents, make sure that you are making the contributions that you need to make to anyone's life, including your own, and you have to make yourself a priority. And if you serve God, you always make the Lord a priority. And how you guide yourself, that means reading your Bible, because no one can learn that lesson for you as well. uh, but the most important thing is really setting boundaries, that we cannot learn their lessons for them. If the person was encouraged and urged to get flood insurance, and you were the person who told that person and they didn't, and then they ended up having a flood and have to come live with you, that is a lesson that they failed. So that means going back, they would have to go back and retake that test like you would do uh, if you failed a test in a class, or if you failed a course, you would have to retake that course. Again, you can't take the test for the person, so they still have to learn that. If we got too many financial gurus and specialists and financial planners and banking people and programs that tell you that you need to save 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund. How many times do we hear that? That's all we hear lately. We've been hearing that so many times. Okay, but then if you lose your job and you only have 1 month in the bank, 1 month of your rent in the bank, you failed that test. Sure, you got to the next month, but you failed the test that was required for you to begin saving money. And it's not always easy. It is not always easy. Take your rent and split it up into 4 months and put back that percentage in some other savings account. And that at least puts you on the road to now trying to have that kind of mindset. But if you don't do anything at all, that means you are refusing instruction. And anybody who refuses instruction, according to the Bible, poverty and shame will come to you. And that is usually what happened. That's what happened for me. My mother said, and I believe it was through God, through my mom, saying that if when she looked into my closet, I was working in high school, and she looked into my closet and she saw a closet full of clothes. And she made the comment, well, you're going to have a closet full of clothes and no savings once you leave that job. And I ignored her instruction, and I did not receive her instruction. And then once I graduated from high school and I had to give up the job because the job was only connected to a person who was in high school, um, um, I had to give it up. I didn't have anything. And I had to scramble. The same thing happened when I graduated from college the first time, and then also the second time. I didn't learn the lesson that I needed to learn. So then fast forward sometime after graduating with the graduate degree, and I am forced to move back from San Diego to Dallas. And then I was able to land a job, but then that job laid me off due to the financial recession. And from, I think, 2008 to 2013, no job, homeless, living with family, having to go into shelters, things like that. And if I had listened way back in 1991, when she was talking to me about this thing, I wouldn't have had the issues that I had way back in 2008 to 2013 going forward, right? So now I'm in 2023, and I got stable. Of course, I had a job as teaching and everything, and now in 2023 is when I am learning that lesson of putting back money. And that lesson is so strong to me. And I have an incentive because I was able to get out of the extended stay motel that I stayed in from 2013 to 2022. I was able to stay in there, get stable, pay my rent every month and everything, keep a job, stay stable, everything. And then now I have my own two-bedroom apartment, and I don't want to lose it. I worked too hard, sustained myself too hard, that I don't want to lose it. I dare not lose it. So now I made sure with the money that I got from working, because I taught a lot of classes, which gave me a lot of extra money to go on ahead and furnish the place so that it didn't look empty, and I didn't feel kind of discouraged. I got all new starter furniture, or restart your life type furniture. And so it's good. But now I'm in the mindset. I want that savings account to be good. I really want that thing to be full. And so now I'm now in that kind of mindset where I make sure. I remember Susie Orman saying something in one of her lessons, that pay yourself first. Here it is, you pay all these bills and you do all these things for other people, but you don't pay yourself. So I have already worked that into my budget, that $1,000 goes into my savings account immediately. That's it. Once the money hits my account, that's what I transfer immediately. So now that's becoming my predictability. And I get mad now if I go over my budget and it looks like, oh, will I be able to do that? I said, no, I make it a priority now. That is the lesson that I should have learned back in 91 to 93, when I had that job, is a lesson that I'm now learning in 2023. And so in some ways I could have learned that lesson much earlier, because it was there for the taking. The lesson was there for the taking, but I was too preoccupied being a people pleaser and getting distracted with other people's problems, so that I didn't really pay attention to me. And when you are out of that situation, like the war reference I made earlier in the video, when you're out of that situation, and you listen to yourself and you see your surroundings and you see where you are, a lot of stuff does become clear. What happens is you are almost like in the grieving stage. It's like the 5 stages of grief. You're almost in the grieving stage because you cannot believe you let yourself get this far. How did this happen? What did I do? I can't believe I let this happen, right? And so you can either stay in that grieving stage and continue to work your way through it, or you can just go get another distraction, which hinders the lesson that you need to learn. And so that's why you need to cut out any distractions. You don't need to learn other people's lessons, even though you can take what they have gone through as some kind of lesson for you. You can't learn the lesson for them. That person still has to sit down with pen and pad and write their way out of whatever it is that they are in. And so I finally learned that lesson. That is a lesson that now has become my predictability, because I no longer want homelessness or having to live with somebody or losing a job to be predictable for me. So now that is unpredictable for me. And saving and making myself a priority and setting the right boundaries with people and saying no without explanation or lessons, and no longer being a people pleaser. I stopped being that years ago, but sometimes it can creep up. But those are the lessons that I needed to learn for myself, that no one could learn from me. They could talk me through it. They could say certain things, but eventually I had to pick up that book and learn me. And so we cannot learn lessons for people. Is something that you definitely need to consider going forward, because your life already has many demands and tasks and responsibilities that you have to endure, set, endure, and complete, like a goal. Okay, you can't take on other people's goals, other people's life's goals. You can't take on their school and go and enroll for them and take the classes and complete the degree for them. They have to do that themselves. You cannot become a better financial manager for them. They have to care enough about themselves. You cannot house people the rest of their lives. They have to care enough about putting a roof over their grown person's head. I'm not saying the times that you may have to, there may be times in your life where you are experiencing a setback, and you may have to go back and live with a parent. You may have to go and live in a shelter. You may have to take jobs that are not paying you well, and things like that. I had to do all of that. But the lesson that I really needed to learn through all that was a lesson that I should have learned back in 91 to 93. And that was the financial lesson. And so now 2023, that's the lesson that is put before me, that I'm going to push as a predictable nature for me, that it just becomes second nature to transfer that money once that money hits the account immediately. Whatever type of money that hits my account, whether it's freelance, job money, whatever it is, to prioritize me. So this is, we cannot learn lessons for people. Really consider this as a very important lesson for yourself, so that you set the right boundaries with people, and you set the right expectations and standards with people and yourself. So you can visit my website, reginawhitefavors.com. You can also visit the Amazon author page, which is amazon.com/author/Regina White Favors. Thank you very much for listening.